Welcome to the Parkinsons Project podcast. The Parkinsons Project seeks to erase the stigma associated with Parkinson's disease while empowering and inspiring those dealing with the affliction to live life to the fullest. The Parkinsons Project aspires to build an engaged, supportive community while examining the journey of living with Parkinson's disease through a positive, empowering perspective. Here is your host of the Parkinsons Project podcast, Tim McNiff.
Hello, everybody. I'm Tim McNiff, and I'd like to welcome you to the Parkinsons Project podcast. The Parkinsons Project seeks to eliminate the stigma that is all too often associated with the disease, and instead wants to empower and inspire those dealing with the affliction to live life to its fullest. Now, the intent of the Parkinsons Project podcast is to share the stories of the people who are living with PD, share best practices from the medical people who are on the front line working to find a cure, and we'll hear from the advocates, those people who are helping Parkinsonians deal and adapt through diet, exercise, and of course, with love, understanding, and unconditional support. We're going to try to keep our episodes to between 20 and 30 minutes, but if we find ourselves in the middle of a compelling conversation, we do reserve the right to extend that conversation to a second episode with the intent of delivering tangible, beneficial content to all of you who engage with us, and we encourage that engagement with an ultimate goal of putting ourselves out of business when there's no longer a need to talk about PD. And it is with that intent that we welcome to us today Susan Vold. Susan is joining the Parkinson's Project. She, if I try to, Susan, put you in a bottle by using bioinformation gleaned from the University of Minnesota where you're employed, I would say something like this. Tell me how close I get. Susan Vold is a board-certified holistic nurse and certified neuroscience nurse who manages patient care within the Movement Disorders Clinic at M Health Fairview Neurology Clinic. Susan has an extensive experience in working with patients with Parkinson's disease, essential tremor, and dystonia. In addition, Susan manages the clinical deep brain or DBS stimulation program. She leads patient education classes in Parkinson's disease and deep brain stimulation. She's a speaker for the Parkinson's Foundation, Minnesota chapter for the American Parkinson's Disease Association. I'm sure I left out something. How close did I get?
Oh, you're right on there, Tim. Good job.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. You and I had an opportunity to talk previously to this encounter today, and we had so many options of things we could talk about. And the neatest thing that came out of that was you threw out a suggestion, and I went, "That's great," because I'm very new in this whole experience with the Parkinson's disease. We talked about it, and we mutually decided to start by focusing on one area of your work for this conversation. And then if things go okay, we're hoping that you'll come back in subsequent episodes and talk about your other work. And so I know we still have like 20 minutes ahead of us and you don't know how it's going to go yet, but theoretically, does that sound okay?
That sounds just fine.
Well, thank you so much. As such, we have given this edition of the Parkinson's Project both a theme and a title. So for those of you keeping score at home, and we know you are, this is episode 11 of the Parkinson's Project podcast, entitled Accepting the Diagnosis. And before we get into the nuts and bolts of Susan Vold, you are living proof that if someone out there sees or hears this interview and is inspired to do something, tell them when you got your nursing degree and what motivated you to do so.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I graduated from the University of Minnesota in 1984 with a political science degree. And then I got married and became a stay-at-home mom for 20 years. And then my mother was diagnosed with leukemia, and I met this hospice nurse in the hospital when she was dying. And that certain individual, he made such an impact on my life that I decided that to be a nurse would be something very, very special and something I wanted to do. I wanted to, I don't know, be a part of someone else's journey and to be instrumental in any way that I could to help people deal with pain and suffering. And so at the age of 47, I got my associate degree in nursing. And then just a few years ago, at the age of 58, I got my Bachelor of Science in nursing. And so I guess I'm the poster child for it's never too late to want to make a difference in your life, no matter what obstacles are in your way.
Oh, it's a beautiful story, and you come absolutely highly recommended. So it's an honor to have you with us. So let's talk about your work as a Parkinson's specialty nurse. You're frequently with people when they receive the confirmation that whatever issues they've been experiencing is in fact Parkinson's disease. What do you typically expect to see and hear from those people who are trying to process this initial diagnosis?
Well, first of all, I want to take away the word expect because I don't expect anything. What usually happens is a certain um, array of feelings will shine through, and it's different for everyone. Just as Parkinson's disease is different for every single individual, so is the acknowledging and learning that one has Parkinson's. It's so different for each person. Sometimes I see a sense of relief in patients where they've known for quite some time something is not quite right. They've kind of like they've known this in their hearts, but they have not wanted to admit it. And so the sense of relief when they get the diagnosis, but that doesn't mean to say that that sense of relief is maintained during the drive home from the office. That's a whole different ballgame. Other times I see tears and sadness. I see denial and anger. And all these things are completely normal and understandable. And it's just unsettling to realize that you cannot control everything in your life. I mean, in a real sense. So, for example, if there's ice in the road ahead and you get into a terrible car accident, or you're on an airplane that has a mechanical failure, or you have a brain that is not producing as much dopamine. These are all things that are beyond your control, and that's really hard. It's really hard to be face to face with your humanity, your lack of control. It's something that only people that have where the rubber has hit the road, where they actually know they don't have control. And other reactions to this can be kind of a victim attitude, which we can talk about later. But all in all, it's just very difficult. You do all the things in your life to live a good life. You make decisions, you work really hard, and you expect a person does expect to have a decent life. And all of a sudden, we've got life reneging on the deal. So no matter how hard I work or how positive I've been in my life or all the good things I've done in my life, now I'm faced with this. How can that be? And I guess one analogy I'd like to give with this and to bring hope to people is, let's say for years and years, you've been thinking about retirement, and you've got this dream about you and your spouse going to Paris and seeing the Louvre Museum or the Eiffel Tower, and you've studied French, you know it backward and forward, and you are so excited. And you get on that plane, and the door opens, and you walk out, and all of a sudden, there's tulips everywhere. There's a windmill, and you're like, whoa, this is not Paris. Well, what happened was you're in Holland. Holland is a completely different destination than you would ever have expected. You don't speak Dutch, you speak French. But you look around, and as your eyes get used to the scene and you start learning Dutch, you can start to see the beauty around you. And that's what I'd like all my patients to understand, that this is not what they expected. It's not what they deserve. It's not what they would have chosen. But now they're here. What are we going to do now?
I love it. I love it. Just kind of give them a new perspective on the situation they find themselves in. You mentioned what you called a victim attitude. I'm wondering, is that the reaction that you might get from a patient? Can that be like one of a series of potential negative behaviors that you may encounter with people who've been diagnosed with PD, or something that they may fall into as a result of that diagnosis?
Yeah, absolutely. When you get to a place where you're in denial and anger, and that victim attitude can come out. And first of all, I want to say that's okay too. Having this victim attitude, whatever it is, whatever you feel, it's all normal and it's all okay. It's just when we get stuck in certain behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
So the victim attitude can make you dependent on other people, and it can cause great strife for your family and people that love you and the caregivers that you may have. Another negative behavior can be addictive behaviors. Addictive behaviors are there so that we don't feel pain. And pain is a myriad of different emotions. So denial, sadness, anger, all those kinds of things can be uncomfortable. And they're hard to sit with. And in our culture, in this American dynamic, we tend to go with the saying, don't just sit there, do something. We've got to do something. We can't feel this way. But yes, you can feel this way. And in fact, you have to feel this way, whatever way that is. And the thought has to change to, instead, don't just do something, sit there. Because the only way to get to the other side of pain is to actually experience it, go through the middle of it. Feelings are not going to kill us, but they have to be experienced, acknowledged, and let go. Most of us want to learn we want to play the piano. We don't want to learn how to do it. We just want to be able to do it, but there is work to be done. And so feeling these feelings, whatever they are, and talking about them with a trusted other is so important. There's a saying by Francis Braceland. He said, sorrow that has no vent in tears makes other organs weep. And this is so true, that if you don't go through your feelings of grief, of having this sensation that your body is going against you, it's just so important to feel, let those feelings come and go, because it's not just going through one feeling and then being done with it. It'll be going through those feelings over and over and cycling through them. And it's much easier to have a cocktail. It's just much easier to just numb the pain and not deal with it today.
We've been taught to avoid, or to put off, or to put something else in place. And you're saying, no, you got to lean into it.
You have to lean into it. And that can be the most frightening thing to do. It's just so important to know that feelings give us information, okay? But they aren't reality. They're not reality. They just give us information. And this is how we feel for this one moment in time. And they won't last.
You mentioned grief. And I remember being back in high school and learning about the stages of grief, but as I learned them back then, it was all about dealing with fatality. Something that was loss, and you lost someone, and you went through these stages of grief and denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, and how they talked about, or we learned them as if they happened in order. Oh, they're in denial, or this or that. And I'm wondering, is there some sort of correlation or commonality with the PD diagnosis? Because in PD, as people who have Parkinson's have said to me, this in itself will not kill you. We're not talking about a fatality in itself, but are there some parallels?
Yeah, first of all, when it comes to the stages of grief, that does sort of imply a linear pattern, right? You start at one point, and then your ultimate goal is to get to the acceptance, and then
Exactly.
all is well after acceptance happens. And in reality, that's not how grief is. Grief can be more of a cyclical thing, maybe more of a spiral. Or if you think of an onion, okay, you peel the onion, you've got the outside skin, and then you peel it more, and then more problems, you can see more problems. You peel it some more, and that's more how grief is. And so, especially in Parkinson's disease, because it is a progressive illness, there will be different stages in the disease, and there will be a sense of loss in the different stages. And that loss will be different for everybody because symptoms and staging is very, very different for every single person. But there is a sense of loss as things happen, as we tend to feel like we lose more and more ability or independence. Attitude is really everything here. And as I mentioned with grief, it's just so important to allow the feelings to come and let them go. It's just so easy for us to brace against something that we fear. We brace against it, or we hate it, or we fight it with everything we have. And that attitude is actually making whatever you're fighting the conqueror over you. But to understand that acceptance doesn't mean you're saying something is good or bad. You're just accepting that this is the reality of life for you today, in this one day. Things can be different tomorrow. Attitudes change. Things change every single day. And so attitudes can change as well.
In the previous conversation that we had that I referred to, you told me, and I'd like to quote you if I could, that you frequently meet people in their most untenable, darkest place. Do you have a process or a playbook to try to get them out of that dark place? Or as we're having this conversation today, is that the goal at all, other than really to kind of guide them through the emotions they experience when they are there, and maybe to help them avoid doing something negative to themselves?
First of all, it's interesting you wrote that down, what I said.
I hope I didn't get it wrong.
No, you got it right. And that's one of the reasons why I went into nursing. It is such a sacred privilege to be with people at their most vulnerable moments in their lives. And this is not taken lightly. It is definitely a privilege and an extreme responsibility. But what I do and what our team tries to do at M Health Fairview is we try to give each patient the tools that they can choose to pick up or not pick up in order to make their lives better. But at the same time, sometimes people just need to be heard. They don't want you to fix them, and that's not our responsibility. And our responsibility, I mean, fixing someone else is taking away their own agency. And our job is to give the patient the most autonomy that they want to have. And that gives more self-respect. Some of the tools that we try to give them, well, as a nurse, I try to give them different perspectives. So in the English language, we say things like, I am hungry. Okay. We use a language that gives actual, it identifies our personhood with something. So I am hungry. Well, I'm not really hungry. I'm Susan, right? In Spanish, they say things like tengo hambre. So I have hunger. So it's important for a person when they're doing their healing or processing of a diagnosis, and they may feel sad, um, or they may feel uh, indignant, or whatever they feel, whatever it is, to realize that they have this feeling. They are not this feeling. Um, the way a person talks to themselves is integral to their healing. Because of the mind-body connection, when you say something like, I'm afraid, the body will start to throw chemicals of stress chemicals throughout the body, and your heart rate increases, your breathing increases, your blood sugar rises. All kinds of things happen when you identify with a feeling. And so when you say, I have fear at this moment, you're no longer identifying with that feeling. You're saying you have a certain feeling that is the reality. You really do feel this feeling, but you don't need to give it a value judgment. This isn't good. This isn't bad. This just is what it is. And that feeling gave you information. It's going to pass. And so having a movement disorder team and provider that you feel comfortable talking with about these very intimate feelings is absolutely important. To getting out of this darkness, to start to realize that there is life after diagnosis. There is a wonderful life. There are tulips and windmills everywhere and things to do. Join a support group with people with Parkinson's so that you can talk to others that have gone through it. And everyone on the planet should have a mental health professional that they see, and especially someone with Parkinson's disease. Learn about Parkinson's from reputable sources and exercise.
Exercise, exercise, exercise. That's the one thing I keep coming across. That seems to be the commonality. Everybody experiences it differently, but I keep seeing and hearing that. Susan, I can only imagine the things that go through a person's mind when they're diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Based on your experience as a nurse, what is the first thing, or perhaps the most important thing, you want to make sure registers with them before they leave the office from that initial diagnosis?
You are more than your disease. Never, never define yourself by your wounds. Happiness is not a gift, it's a result. And we're here to walk with you through this journey. It's a lifelong journey, and you need people that are along that path walking with you.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. We titled this episode, Accepting the Diagnosis. If I can, going back to the 5 stages of grief I talked about earlier, if I may, the concept of acceptance in that context is the last or final stage, because as I said earlier, we're talking about fatality, which we've already agreed is not the case here with PD. So when talking about a PD diagnosis, how important is that concept of acceptance for the person with PD to start the process of moving forward?
Acceptance is really a lovely thing to have. It really is. But I don't want people to think they have to have that in order to move forward.
Okay.
The point is, regardless of your feelings, continue to put one foot in front of the other. There's a saying, say your prayers and do the dishes. You know, just keep showing up. Walk without fainting. One day you'll have acceptance and trust the process. Trust that all is as it should be in this one moment in time.
In my brief experience with PD, one thing I have been made acutely aware of is the essential role of the caregiver or in having a support system. Are there warning signs that one should be on the lookout for if they're trying to support a friend or loved one who has been recently diagnosed with PD that maybe they are struggling?
When you notice any changes in behavior, especially when a person starts to isolate or not accept social interactions anymore, um, that could be part of the grieving process or, going through this process of the diagnosis. And we all need space during these times. But if you notice anything out of the ordinary, and it, it's just so very individual, and only you will really know if something's strange uh, in your loved one, or you'll know in your heart, you'll start to feel that feeling of
Sure.
something's not right. Absolutely talk to your mental health provider, your friends, your family. Ask others what they have noticed too. And then maybe sit down with your loved one and just talk about what you're noticing. Don't put your feelings, or don't say you know what they're feeling, because you don't,
Right.
but you can address the behaviors that give you concern.
Have you and your colleagues noticed or identified any commonalities that may help a person process and start dealing with their PD in a more positive manner? Are there, I guess I'm asking, is there a shortcut?
No, you can't play the piano without learning it. You have to do the work. It's a result, not a gift.
That's me. I'm looking for the shortcut. If someone stumbled across this podcast and our conversation in their initial search for information after having been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, what's the one thing that you would want them to take away from this interview? And did you just say it?
I just said it. I did. You caught that, Tim.
I did. You got to do the work. You got to allow yourself to experience
Yeah.
these things, and you will come out on the other side.
Yes, just walk and don't faint.
How can people get an appointment with you and your team from M Health Fairview?
Well, we do have movement disorder specialists, and our specialists are taking new patients. All they need to do is call 612-626-6688 and ask to be scheduled with a movement disorder specialist. And there needs to be no referral from our end. However, your insurance may require a referral.
All right. Last question. If you could get a message out to the world asking people to do just one thing where Parkinson's disease was concerned, what would that one thing be?
Be a participant in research.
And can that come in many forms? What does that look like?
Healthy people can be participants for Parkinson's research, and just contact, call that number and say you want to talk to Susan Vold about research, and I will connect you with our Parkinson's Research nurse specialist.
And that's for all of us, just not people who happen to be in experience.
Absolutely, everybody, because what we have today, today's therapies were yesterday's research. And we want to put a stop to this thing. We want to put you out of business, Tim.
I want to be put out of business. They said that at the beginning. The sooner we can put this podcast away, no one will be happier than me.
There you go.
Susan Vold is a board-certified holistic nurse and certified neuroscience nurse who manages patient care within the movement disorder clinic at M Health Fairview Neurology Clinic. Susan has extensive experience in working with patients with Parkinson's disease, essential tremor, and dystonia. In addition, Susan manages the clinical deep brain stimulation program. She leads the patient education classes in Parkinson's disease and deep brain stimulation. She's also a speaker for the Parkinson's Foundation Minnesota chapter and for the American Parkinson's Disease Association. Susan, I want to say on behalf of my colleagues here at the project, you are an inspiration, and your manner is entirely confident and inspiring. Thank you for making the time to join us and for all you've been doing to help the people in all aspects of their journey with Parkinson's disease. And we do hope that you will consent to come back and talk to us again.
Absolutely. And thank you for the opportunity today, Tim.
Now, I said, we were talking on the phone, if you do this and you don't have any fun, then I did it wrong. So did you have an okay experience?
I did. My smile should tell it all.
It does tell it all, but you're something else. I mean, all the things that you're doing, I don't know. I always feel like such an underachiever, but you're really putting me on a whole nother level here, Susan. So we've got to talk. All right. Thank you so much. Stick around. I'll be right back with you in a moment. Whoops. I want to do this. Boomer, working the technology. Hang with me. All right. The Parkinson's Project seeks to be a place where you can come for a range of information concerning Parkinson's disease and just find support for yourself or perhaps someone that you love. We encourage you to check us out on Facebook at the Parkinson's Project. You can find the Parkinson's Project podcast wherever you find your favorite podcast. Check us out and rate us. That way we can continue to grow and continue to give support in the ongoing effort to eradicate this affliction. And as Susan said, there'll be no need for us any longer. With that said, this has been the Parkinson's Project podcast. For executive producer Pat Persia, my name is Tim McNiff. I want to thank you for joining us. We look forward to meeting and working with all of you as we seek to build a supportive, empowering community through all aspects of the Parkinson's Project.
Thank you for engaging with the Parkinson's Project podcast. Be sure to look for more content on the Parkinson's Project Facebook page, and we'll see you right here on the next edition of the Parkinson's Project podcast.